I remember in grade school, in my 4th grade class, I remember like sitting in I spent lots of time looking out the window, you know. And I remember looking out the window and seeing people walking on the street, and I remember just thinking, oh man, how awesome would it be to not have to go to school, you know? And I remember thinking, oh man, that'd be so awesome just to forget school, you know, why can't we just bail on the school? The very beginning of school, like kindergarten, I don't think anyone knew that I was going to have a hard time in school. I loved to draw, and I was really good at drawing. I was really good at making things and building things and putting things together. I loved taking things apart and playing with them. But I guess 1st grade is when things started to happen, and other kids were reading, and it was really cool. They're reading these books that are fun and exciting and wanting to read too. I wanted to read, and I couldn't. I just couldn't. I couldn't do my alphabet. A friend of my mom's was a child psychologist, and so I remember meeting with him for a few times, and he was the first one to diagnose me with being dyslexic. And that's all it was. It was just I couldn't get the numbers and letters to work. So 1st grade, they had a resource, which was for kids that were delayed for whatever reason. The teacher would come to the door and every day for resource and call out all the names that needed to go to resource. And I just remember how just devastated as a boy, just like, oh, everyone is just laughing at me, and just the shame of walking out of class. I remember 7th grade, walking home, someone I was walking with was like, hey, you got your report card? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what did you get? And I'm like, well, I don't know, there's lots of different grades. And I didn't want to tell him what I got. He goes, well, what's your GPA? I'm like, oh, I'd probably safe telling him that. I'm like, well, what's the GPA? He's like, oh, that's the number at the bottom. And I told him, I remember it was a 1.4. And he was like, what? A 1.4? Like, can you even get a 1.4? You know, and I didn't know what any of that even meant, but I could tell from his reaction, like, whoa, this is not something I should share with anybody else, and put this report card away. And that was my first report card. At that time of life, all the kids I was in resource with, so all the kids from grade school and then also in junior high, that was when they stopped coming to school. So they either dropped out or maybe they moved, but no one went with me to high school. They were gone. I think back, and I'm just lucky that somehow I didn't believe my report card. My mom would tell me, oh, you're so smart, you're so good at this, look how good you are at shop and art, and you're just amazing. And she'd always tell me that I'm a leader. You know, you're such a leader, all the kids want to be like you. And somehow I listened to her, even though I remember saying to her once, well, if I'm a leader, why is nobody following me? You know, like, oh, it's just, that hasn't happened yet. I remember my senior year realizing I'm not going to be able to graduate. So my counselor calls me in, right? There's like, oh man, there's like 2 weeks left of school. And he calls me and he says, Jared, you're not going to graduate. You're missing all these credits. And I had set myself up for this because I knew it too, but he told me that I was going to be okay. So I remember reminding him of that conversation. And like, I was in here, you know, at the beginning of the year when I actually had time to do something about it, and now you're telling me that I'm not going to graduate. You're my counselor. You're supposed to be taking care of me. I thought there was a problem, and you know, I put this all on him. I'm just this punk kid, you know, setting him all up, and he's like, oh, well, let me review that again and see what we can do. And I'm like, okay. So the next day he calls me back and goes, oh, don't worry, it's totally okay. You're going to graduate. I made a mistake. And I'm like, well, what is it? And he pulls out this list of all those classes I signed up for at the community college. I never took them, I never went to them, but he had all these classes, and he goes, oh, I didn't realize you have all these credits from the community college when you're that. He knew I did it, and he knew that I knew, and I knew that he knew, and I'm like, oh, great, that's great. He put that all in my permanent record, and the next week I was able to graduate from that class and put high school behind me. And my friends that dropped out of high school, I wonder where they are. And I say my friends, but just the kids that I was with in the resource program, I look at it and go, they definitely were failed. more than anything, I think we destroy the self-esteem of these little minds. We shatter these kids. I was shattered in grade school, and I had a whole other section of people like cheering for me and putting me back together every day afterwards. But there's so many kids that don't have that, you know, and we just fail them. And I still feel it. I don't like walking into the school. I get that same feeling. My wife wants me to go talk to their teacher or something. I'm just like, oh, no way. It wasn't until I finally entered real life, you realize, man, real life is not about this small box. Real life is about outside the box. If I could pass that message on to someone like me, that real life is awesome. I'm running this business now. We sell bikes all over the world. We're one of the top cargo bike companies in the country. And it definitely has nothing to do with being in this little box. It has everything to do with being outside of it. Life gets better.